Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to You and Your Health. Thank you for tuning into our program this evening. My name is Erika Robert Hilton, a co-host of this program, and my other two co-hosts are Dr. Edward Isuman and Dr. Yvonne Pulampudov. They're both working backstage today, so you'll get to see them on our next program. Unfortunately, this is our first program for the month. We actually did have a guest scheduled beginning of the program, but he had a family emergency, which is why we didn't have any program about 2 weeks ago. So we're grateful that you are here to join us for our program this evening. So our discussion this evening is on nutrition. This will be the first series for the nutritional health. The next series will be in 2 weeks. And so we're again grateful that you're able to join us. And we have a specialist in that field, Ms. Angela Bardou, who's a registered dietitian specialist from the National Children's Hospital, who's here with us this evening. And she'll be reviewing the principles of nutrition and how we can all maintain an optimal, have an optimal diet, I should say. So before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about our guest. Ms. Angela Bardou is, as I indicated, a registered dietitian, nutritionist with more than 10 years experience. She currently oversees a clinical nutrition program of over 30 dietitians at the top 10 ranked Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. Angela specializes in integrating cultural competency in her efforts to reshape nutritional habits and behaviors for all children, regardless of their socioeconomic background. Angela has helped patients and families tackle the complexities of obesity and related complications, including diabetes, fatty liver disease, and heart disease. She primarily, I should say, treat patients with a multidisciplinary weight management clinic and also work with a surgical team at the Children's National Hospital to address the eating patterns of bariatric patients throughout their health journey. Angela earned her Bachelor of Science degree in dietetics from the University of Maryland, College Park. And as I indicated earlier, she is a registered and licensed dietitian in both Washington, D.C. and the state of Maryland. Angela is an active member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and well regarded in this field by her peers. So let us welcome our guest, Ms. Angela Bardou.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for having me on your program this evening. I'm really excited to be able to address everyone about something that I'm truly passionate about, which is nutrition, something that I've spent years studying and that that's been my career, that's been my life's work for the past 10 years and that I hope to move forward with. So with my presentation today, I mean, nutrition is a huge subject. So we're definitely going to try to cram in as much as we can in the time that we have together tonight. But it's going to be more of a high level review of what I have learned to be the key principles to being successful in our nutritional intake, nourishing our body with our food choices, and creating balance in what we eat every day.
Thank you. Thank you again for accepting our invitation. With that being said, Dr. Eddie, if you're ready, if you don't mind projecting Ms. Bardou's slides, that would be great. I should be projecting it shortly.
Wonderful. So we can move to the next slide. And this is just my discussion point. So how I felt to best bucket what I wanted to discuss. So macronutrients being carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, right? So that's pretty much the components of nutrition. And breaking it down to those larger pieces will help navigate the rest of our conversation. I also want to talk about this lifestyle change. So as we learn more about food choices and the different food groups and our nutrition as a whole, how we can identify areas of possible improvement with our intake, and then how to address those needs and those changes. And then in making those changes, just talking about again, from my experience and what I've talked to my patients about, to my family, in creating a stage for success in making those changes. Next slide. So next, like I said, starting with macronutrients. So this is the nutritional components of our intake. So this is the best way to go from the huge topic of nutrition down to these three buckets. Carbohydrates, and we'll break that down into simple and complex. We'll also go over proteins, animal and plant-based, and then fats, which can be healthy and less healthy. Next slide. All right. Starting with carbohydrates. This is our body's main source of energy, okay? So it's important. I know there's a lot of information out there about carbohydrates being bad, or we should limit or avoid them, like low carb this and no carb that, and keto and Atkins diet that. But we need a certain amount of carbohydrates in order to sustain our energy, which we need for our daily activities of life. So it's not something that is to be eliminated. It is something, however, that we should be cognizant of where we are receiving those sources. Simple carbohydrates are going to be the less healthy option, right? Maybe the tastier ones, but definitely the less healthy option. So those that are coming from sugars and, candy and soda, baked goods. So again, maybe the things that taste really good, but unfortunately are not very good for us. What we want to make sure the majority of our calories are coming from in terms of carbohydrates are going to be complexed. Okay, so this is going to be the whole grains, things that are coming naturally from earth. So our whole grain rice and our oats and plantain and corn and yam and cassava, all of those things are going to be naturally occurring whole grains. That's what we want to get the majority of our carbohydrates from. But carbs are also in fruits, in vegetables, and beans and lentils as well. So again, all healthy foods and things that we can create balance in our meal plan from. And that keyword fiber that's at the end of the slide here is really, really important, because that's like one of the amazing nutrients that we get from our carbohydrate sources. Fiber helps to aid digestion. It helps lower cholesterol and blood sugar. It helps us feel full when we're eating. So it's so important. It's like a magic, substance that is naturally occurring in these foods, and what we should definitely try to get out of this food group. Next slide. So proteins. With proteins, it's really the building block of life. It's literally just that. It's what builds our cells. Okay. So what we need in order for our muscles, for our hair, for our skin, for our nails, for everything comes from this important building block that is proteins. There are non-essential proteins, amino acids, which are naturally occurring in the body. But then there's also essential amino acids, and this is the breakdown of protein that we get from our foods. Okay, a lot of us know proteins coming from meats, right? So our chicken and our eggs and our dairy products, our beef. But they also come from plant sources. So our beans and lentils, I mentioned that before, also being carbohydrate containing. So you're getting two great things in one food with these plant-based options. Nuts and seeds and nut butters like peanut butter and almond butter, and also soy products. So all of these things also have carbohydrates, but they also are really good sources of protein. So a lot of people that are following a plant-based diet, so like vegan and vegetarian individuals, will have this bountiful supply in their eating habits, so that they're making sure to get this really valuable nutrient from it. But also protein, although in smaller amounts, is even in vegetables. It's even in grains. Yeah, broccoli has protein in it. It's not very much. It's not as much as meats or a steak. That is true. But that even has a little bit in it. So there's somewhat of a misconception that you have to eat meat in order to get adequate protein. And that's not necessarily true. And this is not a discussion about turning vegan or anything like that, but it is just to let you know that you can get it in this way. Next slide. All right. So since we're on the topic of meats, and I think just at least my family and my parents are both from Ghana, and I was raised around a lot of meat, a lot of fish, chicken, all of that stuff. So veganism was not happening in my house for sure. And I think as I got into this profession, and I became really interested in nutrition and how it works in our body, how it prevents certain, health conditions and our risk for certain health conditions. It always pretty fascinating to me. And I wanted my family and my parents to be able to benefit from the knowledge that I was learning in school and in practice. So one of the first things was like, okay, if we're going to eat, oxtail and all this, we have to make sure that we're at least for choosing leaner cuts, that we're at least, preparing them in a way that's a little bit more healthy. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these points, but definitely if we're choosing beef, or if you do pork, which is okay, it's okay to have these foods every now and again, choose at least the leaner cuts. So when a tip is to look for keywords like round, top round, bottom round, loin, tenderloin, sirloin, even flank steak. So that's what you want to look for when you're at least choosing these types of foods, right? Also, low fat or fat free dairy products. And these can be plant based too. There's all sorts of milks out there now, and dairy products coming from almonds, peas, cashews, you name it. And those are okay to have because they don't have the saturated fat that we see coming in the plant based options. And like I said before, if you're someone who can't tolerate dairy, or, it's something that you just don't want to include in your eating pattern, that's okay. Because I mentioned before that those same nutrients, even calcium and protein and all those things, come from beans and lentils and vegetables too. So there's a way to balance your eating pattern and get all the nutrition you want if you're not choosing to eat meat or eat dairy. And that's a choice that's all up to you. So the rest of it just goes over some other tips of what to be able to look for. If you're doing ground beef, choose the extra lean. So that's going to be those that are 90% lean or more. So you always want to be in the 90s if you're choosing those that the products are a little bit more processed. But the more that we can do more natural occurring, unprocessed foods, the better. Next slide. Okay. And then I mentioned before the preparation, right? The more that we can use less fats in our cooking, the better for heart health, for weight management, and just overall health as well. So baking, broiling, air frying, that's a huge thing now. And I'm very happy that it is. Even stir frying a little bit of olive oil, something like that is going to be perfectly fine. And different ways of preparing food makes it exciting, makes it not boring. And so I encourage that variety. Like I said, if you're choosing a ground turkey or ground chicken or ground beef, drain off the fat that comes from it when it's being cooked. And that's saving us some calories and having us avoid the extra saturated fats. Using plant-based oils. And again, a lot of variety in plant-based oils. It's not just olive oil. There's safflower oil, and there's avocado oil, and there's all
Rapeseed oil.
yeah, there's all sorts. So you definitely can make sure to be choosing these other fats that are healthier, that aren't saturated. And when we go into our next talking point, we're going to talk about the last macronutrient that I'm going to go over, which is fats. So we can move to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Before that, sodium. So one of the things, and I think I put this in here because of flavor. I like my food to be flavorful. My sister says I'm a little blander. Probably that's true, but but I think it's because I know I want to reduce my sodium
Exactly.
intake. But I do see the value in flavoring your foods differently and making it interesting, like I said before. But if we can reduce our sodium intake, that really is going to be helpful for our health, our heart, and choose other things. Vinegar is a huge thing. You hear apple cider vinegar or vinaigrettes, things like that. So that's going to be really cool to use. Garlic powder and onion powder, to me, has that same kind of tang that salt does, when you use it. So that can be good alternatives. But, the more we can move away from or not use as often canned options or processed options, that's going to be a lot better because they have to preserve it just how it has to go. When it's boxed or bagged or canned, it has to be able to stay on the shelf for a certain amount of time. And so they are adding salt to it. So just be mindful when you're looking at the nutrition labels of what is on there. And I put some definitions of what's like low and high sodium. If you're staying more to the low side, then that's a much better option. I know it's going to happen sometimes. I have canned black beans in my kitchen right now. So, it's going to happen, but I'm still rinsing, draining, things like that. So it's just making the best choice as often as possible as we move forward and making changes. Next slide. Now the facts. So like I said before, fats, we have healthy and we have less healthy. Okay. So our less healthy being saturated fats and trans fats. And then our more healthy options are going to be unsaturated fats. Okay. So I have this chart here that just gives us an idea, the breakdown. I listed what I could from my mind, all of the options that are the less healthy saturated fats. Okay. These are going to be the fats that are usually solid at room temperature. So not going to be, and just think about your arteries like in your body, and are those going to be options you want to have very often that are these solid thick fat sources. So that's when, again, not saying never have beef again, never have poultry again, but we definitely want to have these options a little less often and have some variety. Add some of the plant-based options in there, the vegetable oils and olives and nuts and seeds, like I mentioned before, that also give you a great source of protein, also give you the healthy fats and some carbohydrates too. So a lot of these are like power foods that we should be having more often in our eating pattern, the best we can. And it's the same thing with carbohydrates, where you may have heard to stay away from it. Fat is not something we should avoid completely. We need it. It's essential to our bodies. It's also an energy source. It also helps support our cell growth and protect our organs. It keeps us warm. Like, we need fat in our diets, but it's a matter of choosing the right options in the right amount. And that's what we have to do in choosing unsaturated fats and more of the plant-based options and oil-based options than the solid saturated fats. Next slide. Okay. So now that we've broken down the macronutrients, so we can go into lifestyle changes, areas that I've identified for myself that I can make improvements in, areas that when I'm talking to families, when I'm talking to my patients at Children's National, that keep reoccurring as things that we need to work on, right? There's kind of the same themes that go on. And so I was able to bucket it in this way. So we'll start with meal balance, which also includes snack balance and even balancing our day. Next slide. And you can go to the next one. So when we're looking at meal balance, and I love this graphic from Harvard University School of Public Health, there's a lot of these plates circulating, but I like this breakdown because they really do emphasize that vegetables need to be the majority of your meal. I've seen it where it's kind of in four, or fruits and vegetables are together, or something like that. But I think this is really emphasizing vegetables as kind of the main the star of the show. Sometimes our meats are the star of the show, like that's the entree, but really the vegetables should be the star of the show, and everything else in accompaniment, because that's where we get the nutrition. The vegetables are the most nutrient dense item that's going to be on that plate. And it's also going to have the least amount of calories, and it's also going to have a higher water content, so which is good for us too. So there's just so many things, and it's worth highlighting at our meals. Next, you would have, fruits. And we'll talk about fruits and vegetables a little bit more. But it's just to say that that's where we should start, our fruits and vegetables, our plants. And then you move on to our proteins, because you need it for the reasons that I said, for satiety, for, building our cells. And of course, carbohydrates need to be there too. But it's all about balance. Okay. And not having or excluding any one thing, but making sure that they all work on our plate together. And these pictures are just showing some of, like, the foods aren't always going to look like your plate. I think there's going to be a lot of mixed dishes and
Right.
pastas and things like, and soups and things like that. But I think you still have to look at it as, what's the majority of my meal right now? Is it the soup, which is like tomatoes and onions and herbs and spices? Is it the, I'll just use fufu because my kids use fufu. So is it like the hunk of fufu and then a little bit of soup around? Is it a smaller portion of that starch or carbohydrate? Can I even add maybe a salad on the side of this, and have that too? It may not be, traditionally how we would eat it, but making these modifications can be really important. And I think something that we can build upon as we move forward while still preserving our culture, which is something I really do try to do with my families. How can we make this work where there's still balance and we're still healthy, but still preserving our identity? That's really important to me.
Yeah.
So that's balance in our meals. Next, we can move to balance in our snacks. Next
So
slide.
these plates actually resemble some of the foods that we eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was intentional. Definitely. Um, and so it goes to show you that you can have that balance in the foods that we eat. It doesn't have to be the normal, American, uh, I don't know, chicken breast and white rice, and, kind of plain thing. We can make it work with the foods that we know and love. So next is balance in our snacks. And you can imagine I'm not talking about chips and cookies here. I'm talking snacks. Snacks to me are still items from our food groups, pictured here, that we're able to plan for. Just like you plan for dinner, lunch, breakfast, you can plan for these snacks as well, because snacks are to help us with, preventing us from overeating or grazing in between our meals at our meal times, right? And over consuming. So there are these little mini meals in between to keep us going, to keep our energy up, to fuel our day, and to be another vessel of delivering nutrition to our bodies. So plan for them. Their snacks are a good thing, and they should include two food groups. So the breakdown that I describe to my patients is going to be complex carbohydrate. So some item coming from fruit, vegetable, whole grain. Those are the complex carbohydrates that we talked about before, plus a protein source. Okay. It can be beans, lentils, nuts, seeds. It can be dairy products. It could even be like meats, that's okay too. So an example of that would be, maybe a handful of blueberries and a cup of like Greek yogurt, plain or vanilla Greek yogurt.
Mhm.
The yogurt being my protein and the fruit being the blueberries being my complex carbohydrate. It can be a low fat cheese and crackers. Cheese being the protein, crackers being my complex carbohydrate, if whole grain, right? It can
Mhm.
be hummus or peanut butter or actual nuts and seeds. And you can put that with like dip celery in there or dip, apple slices in there. And you're having that balance, a complex carbohydrate plus a lean protein source. That is a healthy snack. And that's how I define those mini meals or mini snacks in between our meals to keep us going, to keep us fueling our bodies.
So for example, if you have yogurt and a blueberry, could you, instead of viewing it as snack, could you use it as breakfast?
You could.
Okay.
Absolutely, you could. I think what's important, and that's a good segue into the next point that I want to make. So if we can go to the next slide about balancing our day, right? So having breakfast, lunch, and dinner doesn't necessarily mean having full meals at every instance. You can have just a healthy snack for a meal. I don't want anyone to skip meals. I don't want anyone to overeat at meals, but we do have to have these intervals of fueling our bodies throughout the day, of giving our bodies that nutrition that it needs and offering it the variety and balance that we need as well. So if we go to next slide. I describe a little bit what that balance in our day. Now we know the composition of meals, we know composition of snacks. How do we do that in our day? Again, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is what's traditional, but you could have just a snack at any one of those times. And then usually 1 to 2 snacks in between, because the goal is to have a little something, nourishment every 3 to 4 hours. Okay. Usually, and I work in the pediatric population, so I work with a lot of school schedules a lot of the
Mhm.
time and like set lunch times and things like that, which can be hard. A lot of the kids that I counsel, or even my own nieces and nephews, have like a 10:30 lunch or like 11 o'clock
Mhm.
lunch, and it makes it really hard to follow a plan like this to the T. And that's not what I'm not asking for perfection at all. Just for us to be mindful, just for us to be striving for a regular eating pattern. So ideally, it would be breakfast or the first meal of the day within the first hour of waking up, if we can, or as close to as we can. That breaks the fasting at night. That's why it's called breakfast. We're breaking our overnight fast. We're starting our metabolism up. We're waking it up. We're fueling, giving our body our first fuel for the day, so that we can move forward So break the fast with the Greek yogurt and blueberries. Then usually lunch can come, again, 3 to 4 hours later. A lot of times it's like an after school snack, or like a midday snack in there would be that snack that I'm talking, or the first one at least, and then dinner coming on after that. A second snack, depending on how long your day is, could come after dinner, or after the last meal option of the day. Again, a healthy snack option, like I described before. Sometimes it's called dessert for some, and that's okay too. But a healthy snack option coming after dinner, usually 2 hours before bedtime, if possible, just so we give our body enough time when we're upright and still doing things to
Digest it.
metabolize and use those calories before we're just like laying down,
Yeah.
doing nothing with that energy that we consumed. So again, that's ideal. And I know life is not ideal, but if we can move closer to that, then that's going to be a really good a place to start. And I mentioned here again, not skipping meals. And I think breakfast is like what I hear is skipped the most.
Yeah.
Yes, because for so many reasons, right? We're busy, we're tired, we woke up late,
Trying to get to work.
right? Trying to get to work, where not hungry. It's a plethora of things.
Yeah.
And so, but it's just such an important meal too. So if it does need to be something on the go, I know smoothies and shakes and like bars, something like that, it's perfectly fine to have and just grab and go out the door. A little baggie of trail mix, still keeping in mind, do I have a complex carbohydrate? Do I have a protein option in the mix somehow? That can be really helpful to just getting us started. And just a note on shakes and smoothies and things like that, because sometimes those smoothies can just become juice and not really like a balanced option. You can blend that plate that I showed you with all the food groups into a smoothie. You can have almonds in a smoothie, or almond milk. You can have yogurt in a smoothie. You can add fruits and vegetables too. So when we're doing that, we have to be, again, aware. Do I have the balance even in this beverage that I'm going to drink as a meal replacement? Or is it just fruits and all of like the natural sugar and not really anything else that's helping me with the fiber, with the protein that we need to make a balanced option? Next slide. Okay, so my favorites, fruits and vegetables. We can talk about this. So as you can imagine, I'm a dietitian, so of course fruits and vegetables I can go all day, but I limit it to one slide, and it's a lot of text, but I did limit it to one slide. With fruits and vegetables, everyone knows that they're healthy, full of nutrients, low in calories, so beneficial in many different ways, help us balance our plate, so that we're able to limit what's higher in calories and maybe not as nutritionally dense, because you can have fruits or vegetables with anything. It's always something that can complement a meal. What I do recommend is to choose more often than not low glycemic fruits. Okay, so low glycemic fruits are going to be typically the ones that are non-tropical with an edible skin. Okay, and this definitely has less of an impact on our blood sugar, and they're more satiating because of the skin and the fiber that you're able to eat from them. But usually our more tropical fruits, like our bananas and mangoes and pineapples, again, delicious, but they do tend to be higher in sugar, and you can taste the sweetness is there, right? Compared to like a pear or peach. And then you're not eating the skin of it, so you're not getting that added benefit of fiber. So that's something that you should eliminate by any means from your eating pattern, but consider substitutions and consider that balance between the two. And same thing with vegetables. You have non-starchy vegetables and you have starchy vegetables, like our corn, our peas, our beans, potatoes, even carrots are a little on the starchier, sweeter side. Not to say eliminate those, because they're very good for us, but the balance needs to be there in terms of maybe doing more of the leafy greens and the those vegetables that have a high water content, right? Like the cucumbers and squash and zucchini. There's so many out there. So having that balance is so important. But if we're looking to, reduce our calories a little bit, or if we're looking to, lower our carbs a little bit as for our whatever our health, goals are, then that's some adjustments that can be made with fruits and vegetables. So having them at meal and snack times, as I already mentioned. And then I put a note about juicing, and it's kind of the same thing that I mentioned with smoothies. Juicing is popular. I'm not a huge fan of juicing, just because
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. I know. That's why I said I probably should address this. I'll probably get a question. But with juicing, for me, it's just fruits and vegetables alone. If you think about how much you have to blend to get even 8 ounces, and remember, fruits and vegetables, especially fruits, have sugar, have
Mm-hmm.
carbs. That's a lot. You know, it
Yeah.
ends up, it can be the amount of grams of sugar in like a 12-ounce cup of juice of fruits and vegetables juiced.
Mm-hmm.
And for my patients, it's usually more fruits than vegetables that are being juiced in there just for the taste, right? The
Yeah.
sugar adds up to be that of a soda, you know, because it's
Ooh.
so much that you're putting in there. There's not any protein, you know, to help blunt the effect of the sugars that are in the beverage. The fiber, depending on if you peel, you know, the vegetables or if you're putting it whole in there, that can be lost. And just that effect of satiety. We tend to be more satisfied when we're chewing and eating than when we're drinking. So that
Mm-hmm.
can be lost as well. So again, not a huge fan, not saying never touch, you know, juice
Mm-hmm.
ever, but just keep that in mind. And I will always recommend the whole fruit over a juice version.
Interesting. Okay.
Next slide. Okay. Moving on to portion sizing. So, wanting to look at the difference of portions versus servings. And that's on this slide because we know on nutrition labels, they give us a serving size, but the portion is what we decide to eat. And sometimes it's a little different than what's on the label. It can be multiple servings and then what's
Yeah.
on the label. And you have to then do the math, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
decide to eat more or than what a serving is, you may have to, you know, triple or quadruple what nutrition you're getting from that too, good and bad. It may be
Yeah.
more fiber, but it also may be more, you know, sugar. It may be more saturated fat, maybe more sodium. So you have to be cognizant of how much I'm actually putting into my body and making those determinations for ourselves. Maybe I should just have one serving of this. I cannot, you know, take the whole bag or take the whole box and just kind of eat from it. Maybe just portion out what I need, balance it with some fruits or vegetables, balance it with a protein, so that I can feel more satiated without having to eat more of this product. Those are the questions you have to have with yourself when you're looking at the label and determining how much you need or how much you want to eat at that time. So I think that balance of what a portion size is and what a serving size is an important distinction to make when we're making choices. Next slide. Okay. I use these visuals a lot in clinic because, you know, kids love pictures, especially the younger ones, but adults do too, I've learned. And so I think it's really helpful because I don't expect everyone to carry around like a measuring cup and measuring spoons everywhere they go, home, work, school. I don't think that's realistic. But I often use just the hands as a method of, you know, a visual, a roundabout, an approximation of how much we should be getting for ourselves. And it's quite individual because my hand is my hand and my size for me, right? So that if I'm eating, you know, a piece of salmon or whatever the protein is, it should be about the size of the palm of my hand. All right. If I'm having some, you know, brown rice or something like that, it should be the size of my fist for me. If I want a cup of I don't know, berries or nuts or seeds or whatever, it should be, you know, the size of my of a cupful for my hands. Yeah. So that's a really good way. And your hands are always attached to you everywhere you go, you know, so you can use that as your aid, at least a starting point. But if you are around other like measuring spoons or cups, you can use those too, at least initially, to see what does a half a cup look like. That's what the serving size of cereal says, but what is it's not much when you look at it, right?
Yeah.
So just knowing what that looks like, and if you're saying, yeah, a half a cup isn't going to do it for me, I need two, you know, I need two servings, then do the math, like I said before, and know what that is. The other visual aid on here, it just has like some other like household items and sporting items and things like that, to give you a sense of what one cup or one portion of these foods are when you just look at like a baseball or a computer mouse, in comparison. But I found the hand to be a pretty good tool, that you can use, and just even the plate, that
Mm-hmm.
balance in itself can help portion and help, you know, maneuver how much you should be eating.
Yeah.
Next slide.
I think the issue for us will be the rice.
Yeah. I know. I can't. And my
Rice is the
mother,
base of our food.
yeah, it's like it's the foundation. I keep saying vegetables should be, but it really is rice. I'm definitely know that. Definitely am educating my parents. My mom will not change to like brown rice to make jollof rice. That's not
Oh
happening.
no,
I
that's
would
it
never
tastes the
even
same.
ask.
I've tried it.
I know I would never even ask her to do that. Like and then,
It
but
looks weird. It
it
doesn't taste
looks
the
weird, the
same.
texture's off, I get it. So I'm one of those, like, realistic dietitians, and I
Yeah,
know what you can't do and what you can't get away with.
yeah.
But we have compromised on portion. We have done that. So have the jollof rice as you make it for sure. But mom, we need to have, like, salad with it,
Mhm.
but we need to have, like, our, chicken or something. So we have compromised on that. And this tip, the note on mindful eating is how I was kind of able to help them do that, help them, balance their meals and feel satisfied on it. That's what mindfulness is supposed to do. Have us really think through our actions,
Mhm.
so that we can get to the goal that we need, and that's to be satisfied on the appropriate portions of the appropriate foods, eating the appropriate times of day. That's what we've gone over so far. So again, portion sizing, using smaller plates, bowls, cups, that in itself will help limit how much we're eating, right? These huge plates that we're going to fill it up and eat all of it or most of it. So let's just start with a smaller plate to begin with. Eating in a certain order. So drinking your water first, having your salad or whatever vegetable, again, if it's not in a mixed dish, having that first, and filling up on what's the most in fiber, what's the most in nutrition, what has the water density, fill up on that. Then you can move on to your protein food. Then you can move on after that to your carbohydrate. If you're able to eat in that order, it's kind of weird, but it does work. So if you're able to eat in the order as opposed to kind of taking a little bit of everything, it does help with filling up on what's least in calories, what's most in nutrients, and then moving on to the rest of it. Slowing down our eating, okay, that's really important. Not being distracted when we're eating. So it should take about 20 to 30 minutes to finish a meal, like a dinner meal, and less time, of course, for a snack. So if we're taking that amount of time, then that's enough time for that signal to go from our belly to our brain. Okay, filling up, feeling good, satisfied, stop, right? But if we're intercepting that signal with social media, our phone, our TV, whatever, that other stimuli, it's going to block the signal. And we're not going to be able to recognize that as well as we could have. We're focused at the table if we can, eating our food undistracted and taking that time that we need, chewing thoroughly, like finish what's in your, my mom would always finish what's in your mouth. That's the real thing that helps before you stuff some more in there, like take a beat, finish everything that's in there, and then you can have another bite, right? But it does slow
Mhm.
you down and it helps your body just process what's going on, process this digestion and this nutrition reaching my stomach. And then I can recognize I'm good to go. And if I'm still full, am I really still full? Taking that moment. And then again, making a different choice, maybe not getting more rice, as delicious as it may be, maybe getting more salad, more vegetables, maybe drinking more water or having a fruit, making those choices. And it's habit forming. After a while of doing this and putting this into practice, it's going to be routine. It's going to be how you maneuver your meals moving forward. Next slide. Okay, we can skip to the next one. So dining out, not much here. We know that dining out, you lose all control when you're not cooking your food, which is not a bad thing all the time. People are tired. People are need convenience. I get it. Sometimes you want to lose control over having to make your meal, but it comes with a risk, if you will, of not being able to know what they're doing back there, what ingredients they're using back there, how they're preparing it necessarily, how they're seasoning it. Everything that I talked about before, that's out of your control. So what is in your control is what you're choosing on the menu, right? And usually a lot of menus are pretty descriptive with, say grilled this or braised this or fried this. Like you can pretty much decipher what cooking method they're using by the description. Also, maybe more simple items. A lot of the like mixed dishes that you get from outside, and this is not only eating at a restaurant. It can be takeout. It can be Uber Eats or Grubhub or all the other ways that you can get food so easily now. But, it can definitely be any of those means. But a lot of the mixed dishes, pastas and things like that, they're adding butter and creams and things like that. If you get more simpler options, then you're able to kind of negate what else they could be hiding in there that you may not know about. Choosing to drink water instead of like the lemonade or the iced tea or the sugar sweetened beverage. Fruits and vegetables as your side. McDonald's has salads too. Like everyone has, or fruit cups or something like that. You can get that as a side option. And like I said, if we can limit our portions, choose the healthier cooking methods, then that's how we can take some of that control back. Next slide. All right. So sweets, drinks, and like sweet foods is where I want to break the sweets into. So less sugar sweetened beverages. That's across the board. Every dietitian, every nutritionist will always say that that's what you're supposed to do. They'll probably say none at all, but I think that's hard. Because I don't drink like sodas and stuff, but I do drink wine, and that's the sugar sweetened. That's the sweetened beverage. We forget about that, but it is a sweetened beverage, right? It's juice. It's adult juice, but it is. And it would be hard for me to let go like forever. So this is not to say never ever again touch any sweet beverage, but we do have to limit them because there really isn't any benefit to sodas or juices health wise or nutrition wise. It's really just there for the sweetness, because we can drink water very easily for hydration. So that's not why you need it. It's just something that we enjoy. But if we can limit that, and that includes our coffees and teas that have things in it, because plain coffee and plain tea are actually very healthy sources of hydration. Like they're good for us. They have a lot of antioxidants and a lot of properties in them. But when we add the creamers and the sugars and the lattes and the frappuccinos and all those things that make Starbucks so prosperous, it becomes a whole different ballgame. It becomes soda, so we have to manage that a little bit better and make those choices less often. Choose water, and even like a fruit and vegetable infused water, herb infused water. They have all these different options. You can do it yourself, or you can buy like the sparkling water or seltzer waters that have like a hint of some fruit. These options are available to us. But we really do have to move away from sugar sweetened beverages as much as possible, because they're just not benefiting us at all. And I found to not have it in the house is the best way to do that. And not making that choice when we're eating away from home too. One thing that again, another note or something that I get questions about are those like non-nutritive sweeteners, like the stevias and splendas and aspartame, which is like sweet and low, those kind of things. In terms of like health effects, what my research has told me is that it's kind of inconclusive. I've seen all different takes on it, so I'm not really sure what to believe. And I can imagine my patients would be the same way. Like, I'm not sure, is it good? Is it not good? Will I get canceled? Not good? So when it's so up and down like that, I'm like, maybe it's best not to do it, just, because we don't know. And it's fairly new in food industry to have these non-nutritive sweeteners. So, again, I would say avoid them if we can, because we just don't know in terms of enough about the health risk. What I do know about in terms of nutritional risk or what we should look out for is it's still sweet. Even though the calories aren't attached to it, it's still sweet. It still sends a signal to our brains, I'm having something sweet. And usually when we have that signal of sweetness, we crave. So sweetness brings on cravings oftentimes. And because these non-nutritive sweeteners they're like hundreds and sometimes 1,000 times more sweet than even table sugar. You don't have to eat much of it. You don't have to use much of it, but it's still like you're getting a mega dose of sweetness, and that signal's still going off. So you may not be getting the calories from using those products, but if you give into the cravings that they can cause, you're getting it that way. So it's important to
Dr. Yvonne posted about, what about honey? Did you put that in the same category?
Yeah. Still sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maple syrup is still.
Syrup, molasses, brown sugar, white sugar. It is all
Mhm,
sugar. It's metabolized the same way. You have some health benefits, like there's a few more like micronutrients. There's a little bit more magnesium and,
mhm,
honey. There's a little, that's not in sugar and that kind of thing. But it's pretty minute. It is sugar. So like I said, keeping it down, maybe a couple teaspoons maximum a day, so you can still have it. And it's all about balance. Like that's what I'm hoping I'm conveying in this talk, is that there's room for all of it. There's room for all of it. Some of it needs to be put on a higher pedestal than other things. But yeah, we still have to manage that a little bit better. But it is still sugar. So you have to be careful. All right, next slide. So I mentioned the sugar cravings and
mhm,
how to. So number one is, how do I avoid them? And it's like I said, not having things that are too sweet that would trigger them. Eating a regular meal pattern so that your body is not feeling like it's deficient, right? You've been eating nutrient dense foods throughout the day. So you're fueling your body, and it shouldn't feel that it hasn't gotten what it needs. But you may still crave stuff anyway, because I
mhm.
definitely follow a regular meal pattern and avoid sweets and all that stuff. And I still want chocolate sometimes, and that's
Mhm.
okay. and,
Yeah.
and I am of the thinking that you shouldn't ignore these cravings, because they only intensify, and
Mhm,
they likely will lead you to make an even worse choice than if you had just had a little something earlier, right? So what can that little something be? Maybe choosing fruit, or choosing yogurt, choosing like fruit popsicles, or things that have more of a water content and not as like concentrated in sugar. I mentioned like protein bars. They sometimes have like little dark chocolate in them, or trail mix. So you're still getting protein, you're still getting complex carbs and fiber, but also a little something else, to help you take the edge off, if you will. Sometimes it's more hydration. You might just be thirsty. So drink water. It can be flavored. Have your tea, have your coffee, not with a bunch of sugar, just limited, or honey, just limited, but it's okay, to do that. Or an alternative snack to like a dessert food, or to a baked good. Have these healthier snack options, like I mentioned before. It can be frozen yogurt as your ice cream, right?
mhm.
It can be, it's different fruit with like a little whipped topping. Those kind of things can help take the edge off a little bit and have you move on from that. But if you have the balance of your day, you're following this regular meal schedule, it will hopefully avoid you from having these sugar cravings, or at least not as strong, where one of these can't remedy it. Next slide. All right, so we're coming down to the end, because I know I can fill up the time.
No, this is very good information. So.
We're coming down to the end, though. Stages for success, right? So measuring our readiness to change. Are we ready to do anything that I just said? What our barriers are, because it's very real. Like, we will run into things that have us either regress in our progress, or have us not start at all. Just because of whatever situation we're in, and then really looking at how we can strategize given those barriers, so that we can make those changes that are best for our health. Next slide. Okay. So we use the trans theoretical model in clinic and everywhere. So it's not only like a nutritional thing by any means, but just stages of change, right? So pre-contemplation being, this is not on my radar at all. Contemplation, I'm at least thinking about it. I know that it's important, or something I want to do. And again, this is not only with nutrition, it can be anything. I usually use exercise with this, because I regress quite a bit. So this, and try to figure that out for myself. So I know this is important. I'm thinking about what I need to do and making a plan. That's the preparation, right? So I can put things in action, so I can take steps and actually move forward with those steps, and then maintain the progress that I've made, the steps that I've taken, the changes that I have in maintenance. But like I said, those red arrows, at any point you can move backwards for a number of reasons. So it's what we can do to keep moving forward and to maintain and sustain those changes, which is why I'm so about, balance, and not eliminating anything, or not having too much of anything, because that's much more sustainable than never, or elimination, or this is bad, this is good. So that can definitely help. If we go to the next slide.
I'm so used to seeing TTMs and public health in terms of screening, um, diseases and things like that. I'm quite used
Oh,
to seeing being used in this method.
for sure. For sure. And that's why I said I know who I'm talking to. So I know that we're using it in other areas too. So with common barriers, so why may we regress, or why may we not, start to begin with? A lot of times it's a lack of knowledge. That's why I love to have these conversations with whomever is willing to listen to me, because I think we just need to be informed. What is the information? What is reasonable? What are resources? How can I start? Cultural factors. I know that sometimes in some cultures, including my own, being heavier is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It means that you're doing well, that you are eating well, that that you're prosperous. And I know that it's felt in a lot of different places. So that can be hard when someone is maybe feeling that they need to make some improvements to their lifestyle to manage their weight better, or because of how they perceive their own health. But that could be different depending on their culture. So that's something that could be a barrier sometimes. I mentioned like social media, not only distracting us from mindful eating, but there's all sorts of things that are going, all sorts of messages, everything, misinformation. And it's not only like politics; it's very much nutrition as well. So that can be hard, not knowing where to go or what to trust in making these moves. A lack of motivation, and again, that's sometimes me with exercise, especially if I'm tired or something after work. It's hard to get going. Just our mental health, right? So I've just noticed a lot of families, a lot of patients are in a very depressive place right now, with the pandemic and things that have been happening, and getting going on lifestyle change and making improvements and setting goals is not necessarily something that they're able to do. Food insecurity, huge, a huge barrier. You can't even get started if you don't have these wonderful fruits and vegetables that I've been talking about, right? I'm so glad in DC that we have so many great partners and so many great resources, even a food pharmacy in our hospital to give to these patients, which is really cool. Our food environment, and that's not only with foods itself, but just what the general sense is in the household. If it's a supportive household, if there's any like enablers to eating poorly or saboteurs to eating well, that's your environment that you have to combat with. A lack of time. I'm not eating breakfast, lack of time, or going to the store, whatever, meal planning, whatever that means, but that's a huge barrier. And just transportation. In DC, there's a lot of public transportation, which is great, but not every store, not every grocery store, not every place where there are, is by somewhere that a metro will take you to. So that can be a barrier too. And this is just what I could think of, and put on a slide. There are so many more things. So that can be tough and something that we have to work on. I think we're coming up on the last couple slides. So next one, I believe, is strategies. Okay. So I think support systems, putting the right people around you, the right role models, not having those enablers or saboteurs, making sure that everyone in your circle know that this is something that's good for all of us and that we should be working on. I've been talking about health and improving health and health journeys. I mentioned weight too, because that's important to some people. But for me, and what I always emphasize is how I want you to be healthy. I want your heart to be strong. I want you to be well inside, first and foremost. I'm not celebrating our successes or, our, I won't even say failures, but our hiccups, our stumbles in our journey. With food, it's kind of counterproductive. If you decided not to give up sodas, and then you said, I gave up sodas, I'm so glad for the week, so I rewarded myself with like a latte from the Starbucks. It's like, so, but choose other things. Get yourself a shirt or something, or nails done, or something else for yourself. Planning, I mentioned that before when we were talking about the stages of change. That's really important to helping us stay on track and forming those habits that we can sustain. I mentioned before, this is not about bad foods, forbidden foods, elimination, never. It's about sometimes, and finding the balance and how we can make sure that we're having the good stuff or the healthy stuff or the nutrition stuff most of the time, but still be able to have those indulgences, like I said, and offering ourselves some grace. It's okay if we stumble. It's okay if we regress, but being able to come back and work on those goals again and make those changes to improve our health and our nutritional status is huge, and something that we should continue to always work forward as many times as it takes. Next slide. So here are some resources, just some websites that I usually recommend to families to get meal ideas or just more guidance, more information like what I shared today, or, cookbooks, anything like that. I think these are really common that I share with my families, that they seem to get a lot of information from. And then I think we have 5 minutes for questions.
Well, thank you, Angela. This is certainly a great presentation, and you gave a lot of information on the slides that we certainly do plan to share with our members as well. There's a question that Dr. Eddie put in the private chat. What drinks contain antioxidants, and is taking antioxidants good for you?
Yeah, well, yes, antioxidants are good for us, and usually with the fruit and vegetable based drinks are going to have antioxidants in them. Again, it's about the balance. So you get good stuff from that, and there's even some that they've added, different things in drinks to improve the antioxidant power. But a lot of like the berries and those kind of things. So like the smoothies that I mentioned with the protein component, it's a great, nutritional supplement, because you get the impact of those antioxidants from the fruits, from the vegetables, but then you get that balance from the protein. So in terms of a meal option or a snack option, you're feeling satiated on it and getting a bigger bang for your buck. But with that being said, antioxidants, although good, there are a lot of those beverages that have a lot of sugar in them too. So it's finding the
You have to
balance,
read the
looking
back
at
of
the
it.
label.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. So you can just eat fruit and then get it that way.
Yeah.
That'll be an easier way to go.
Which is the best fruit to eat on an empty stomach?
So it depends on how you, I guess, receive some fruits, because those who have more sensitive to like more acidic fruits, or have like GERD or reflux or something like that, that's probably not a good idea to have like those more citrusy fruits. So some of the more mild ones, like the berries, would be a better option. A lot of like the pears and apples, those are also going to be pretty bland in terms of acidity. So you more so the things that are more acidic, more citrus, you want to kind of stay away from on an empty stomach and do the others.
Okay. Do we have more questions, Dr. Eddie, from the audience? Salad. Salad.
Oh,
Of
Nana.
course, Auntie Nana.
It's possible. Yeah, I've had some type of veggie ahead of having the fufu. But what I said initially, because I know that's not how it usually goes. I recognize that. So it's just the portion of the starch, the portion of the fufu is what we diminished. And I had more of the fish, more of the protein, and the soup, because that's the tomatoes, that's the onions, the herbs. It's the balance. It's limiting the carbohydrates so we can have more of what's more nutrient dense.
So, Auntie Nana, I've seen my mom have fufu and soup, and then she had actually broccoli, steamed broccoli on the side. So you can actually mix these
You
things.
can do it. You can make your own rules.
So I have one or two questions, and Dr. Eddie, please feel free to post the questions once you get them. You spoke about meal prep in terms of steaming food and things like that. I was curious, since a lot of people use, and probably including myself sometimes, use microwave to heat up our foods. What is your take on that, especially in prepping vegetables?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, microwaves are one of those, I don't want to say controversial, but because of the microwaves and that radiation of food, to heat it up, that there has been some science. Well, I don't know if I want to say how much research or whatever, but it is something that people talk about and say that they rather avoid. I'm all about it has been deemed safe, and I'm all about how can we maximize our nutrition with any tools possible. And if the microwave is how we get to that end, I'm
Mhm.
okay with that. We're not always going to have the time to do stovetop cooking. It's going to be difficult. And that's just kind of not the world we live in anymore, where we can do that. So I say it's okay to use a tool such as that, especially if you're heating up vegetables. Like if you're doing some type of less healthy option, I would say no, you can't.
So, in terms of plant-based things that to substitute that you mentioned, soy. I'm just curious in terms of soy and men, in
Yeah.
terms of promotion.
Right, right. And again, it's about how much. I didn't get into, you may have to invite me back so we can talk about like the
Definitely,
the
definitely.
amounts and everything. Because yeah, too much is definitely not something that we want anyone to have, but there has been research done for men in particular, and hormonally, and the changes that can happen. So it's definitely something that can be limited. And or avoided if we want to do more plant-based that comes from nuts and seeds and beans. Then it's possible to do that too, and just vegetables and grains. You can definitely have balance just with that and not do soy at all. It's possible to do it too, but yeah, we have to limit our amount of soy products. But it's possible to do that and still live a healthy plant-based lifestyle.
Okay, there's a question. Is it healthy to eat twice a day?
So this is something I didn't mention, like intermittent fasting. Like when I think of the 2 times a day, and that's what I think about, because I will say, as a weight loss tool, very effective. I can't deny the effectiveness of something like that for weight loss. For nutritional reasons, only allowing yourself 2 opportunities to fuel your body, to give yourself the nutrient it needs to sustain throughout the day, is a lot tougher to do. And then what you're choosing in those only 2 meals as well, it's critical as well. And not feeling hunger, and not, so there's just a lot of things that come with only eating a couple times. But
Mhm,
some people have conditioned themselves to do that for whatever reason. Sometimes it's just their lifestyle or their schedule, or again, more of an intermittent fasting
mhm.
goal for weight loss. Again, effective, but sustaining something like that can be very difficult. And then I've noticed, and this is not something I recommend to my pediatric patients, of course, who are still growing, but even with adults, I've noticed it's very difficult to get in the nutrition that you need to meet all of your needs if you're only eating twice in the day.
Yeah, especially if you're not snacking in between that
Exactly.
too. And
Mhm.
obviously the timing of the last meal too, because you can't have a meal at 10 o'clock. So, definitely. So Dr. Eddie, do we have like maybe 2, 3 more minutes before we have to get off? Okay, there's another question. Is it good to escape breakfast in the morning?
No. So I think this might be like the to
Oh, to
skip,
skip,
hashtag to
yes.
skip. Yes. So no, this is we talked about this earlier, that it's not something I recommend because of how important it is to break that fasting overnight, to get your metabolism revved up, ready to go. But it doesn't have to be pancakes and eggs. It can just be a snack option, like we talked about before, just something that is balanced, to get you going in the morning, to start that metabolism going, to fuel your morning activities. And really, it does kind of dictate the rest of your day. Oftentimes, again, what I've seen in my patients is when they don't have breakfast, they're kind of making up for that loss in nutrition all day long. They may be grazing a little bit more, or having a couple additional snacks, or eating larger portions at the subsequent meal times that come afterwards, or eating later in the evening time. It's as if the body knows, I got to get it in somewhere, and you didn't give it to me in the morning. So yeah, it's interesting. Our bodies are so amazing that to kind of maneuver that way. I'm gonna get it in, but sometimes you're getting it in when you're least active. You're not using that energy, and then it
Uh-oh,
doesn't
she
just
said she's been doing
disappear.
that for a very long time.
Yeah.
Dr. Eddie, do we have more questions? I think we've done this question already. So while I wait for him, for like maybe 1 or 2 more minutes before we let you go, I'm just curious in terms of factors that may affect nutrient composition in terms of how food is processed and stored. So obviously, in terms of cooking, sometimes we overprocess our food, right? Overcook our
Right.
food. Therefore, we end up losing all the nutrients and things. And in terms of fruits, I should say, for example, banana, whether banana should be ripened before, eat it. So do you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And my mom, she's guilty of cooking food to death. I say that I said all of the nutrition's in the water. But yeah, I think that's something in terms like the ripeness. It's more so when it's more ripe, you're concentrating the sugar.
Right.
So but the nutrition's still there, like the vitamin C is still there, like the nutrition's still there. Unless you're like processing it out, like cooking it or something, like losing it, it's still there. But just that the macronutrient is more concentrated when it's
And
ripened,
sugar.
but the nutrition's still there.
Okay. Well, Dr. Eddie, if you're still there, let me know. Do we have any questions or further questions? So we don't, and we can let Ms. Badu go. I think you will post it if there is. So, Dr. Yvonne said it's an awesome presentation, and thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, we
guys.
certainly appreciate your time, and we are, yes, going to ask you to come back because I have multiple questions that we didn't have enough time to ask you. So, thank you so much for this presentation. And as I indicated, the link will be shared as well as your slides will be shared, and I'm sure we may have questions. And if we do so, we'll certainly reach out to you. But yes, I will be contacting you back for you to come back for a second presentation whenever it's feasible for you. So thank you so much, Ms.
Yeah,
Badu.
thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye. So, family, thank you for tuning in to our discussion. We certainly hope that you gain a lot um, on this topic and understanding what we can do to improve our dietary intake and manage our nutritional health. We hope to see you next time. As I indicated, this is our first series. We might have a third. So, we do have a second series on nutrition in 2 weeks, which will be hosted by Dr. Yvonne. And thank you again for watching. Again, feel free if you have any questions and concerns, reach out to one of us and we'll certainly try our best to answer your questions. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, I believe. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care. Bye bye.